The forever returning Roman Reigns. You love to see it. You love to see it. I know we've had God knows how many returns of Roman Reigns just this year itself. But every time that OTC theme, I Am Greatness, hits, there's a pop in the arena and there's a pop in my household. Welcome everyone to this week's Raw's Takeaways. Now of course the most prominent thing from this Monday Night Raw arguably is Roman Reigns' gazillionth return this year, which for the most part has been universally received quite well amongst wrestling fans. Like, you've always got the outliers that are hating a bit, but let's be honest, we love to see it. And number two, Roman Reigns being in the WWE programming elevates it to levels it's not going to be without him. And let's not forget, this whole Renaissance era that we're living in and we're glamorizing sometimes and sometimes we're shitting on, a lot of it's to do with Roman Reigns' tribal chief run as the head of the table from 2020 to 2024. And I guess the only downside is that when Roman Reigns does always return, when is he again gonna go and disappear? When is he gonna go and jump on a project, or when is he gonna go work on a movie or anything like that? He's in that latter phase of his career now. So I can understand that argument, but now I really think we're getting into the juicy part of the Bloodline. And I know me saying the Bloodline in 2025, late 2025 actually, is pretty ridiculous, but that story still has some juice to it. If you guys remember a couple of years ago when, I think it was WrestleMania 39, the ending of it, and we were all in disbelief when Cody Rhodes got, you know, I guess screwed, and someone dashed a chicken at him. I still remember that chicken vividly in my head. We all thought, okay, how much gas is left in the tank of the Bloodline in terms of the actual story in the saga? We had Paul Heyman, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said something along the lines of, we're not even in the third inning yet. That was like 2+ years ago. Fast forward, and now we're in a position where Roman Reigns just returned on Monday Night Raw, which again, we've seen so many times, I understand. But his interaction with Jey Uso specifically, and Jimmy Uso hovering in the background, just got me thinking. It's exactly what Triple H said. The Bloodline storyline is truly the Avengers Endgame for the WWE. And without it, I think the WWE suffers. I understand there's been spin-offs or knockoffs with Solo Sikoa's Bloodline 2.0, whatever you want to call it. All that's been branched off from the Bloodline, this tree, pun intended, has given so much life to different parts in the WWE. Even heck, the Solo Sikoa side of things on SmackDown. I mean, the MFT thing is still going on now, which is really an extension of the OG Bloodline 2.0, and it all comes back to one centerpiece. Everything that Roman Reigns did. And what's really interesting is, on this episode of Raw, we didn't just see the traditional Roman Reigns we've seen for maybe the last 18 months, ever since his loss at WrestleMania 40 against Cody Rhodes. Dare I say, we saw Roman Reigns with a bit more layers here. We saw him call back to his heelish ways from 2020 to 2024. Almost that narcissism, that arrogance of knowing he is the only one. He is the man that WWE revolves around. But this time it's with a twist. It feels like he's giving his throne to Jey Uso. Sort of that grooming process. And really what I love about this entire story and the layers here, it's pulling in things from 2020, from 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, of course. The last 5 years, the whole saga, specifically with the right-hand man. And this leads me into Jey Uso, who I believe is having arguably one of the best runs of his career. Now I know that's crazy to say because he's been world champion before. He main evented WrestleMania with his twin brother against Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. I understand all those moments and runs were impeccable, but this character of Jey Uso does a few things very well. Number one, it ties him to the Bloodline, his brother, his cousin Roman Reigns. And let's be honest, Jey Uso flourishes when he's alongside his brother, when he's with Roman Reigns, and he's a part of a storyline to do with the actual greater Bloodline. He always flourishes there, as opposed to a single Intercontinental title run or a WWE Championship run, World Heavyweight Championship of course, and seeing him once again in that environment. But this time, the focus is a bit more on Jey Uso versus where he used to be originally in the Bloodline. I know he was the right-hand man, but right now it looks like he's stepping up to be the new tribal chief perhaps, or the new head of the table. Roman Reigns is starting to realize perhaps his time is limited in the WWE. He eventually is going to move on. He wants to pass on his power to Jey Uso. And it seems like Jey Uso is crumbling crumbling under the pressure. We saw him a couple of weeks ago be on the phone with someone. It was probably Roman Reigns he was trying to contact to get advice from. And that interaction we had between Roman Reigns and Jey Uso at the end of Raw, and what Roman was saying to Jey, saying, hey, this is all yours, screw everybody else. He said something else that I probably can't say on YouTube, but the intensity was there. And this again has opened up that bloodline story, at least in my eyes, showing us that we actually still have, believe it or not, in 2025, we have more juice left in the tank when it comes to the bloodline. With Jey Uso being this conflicted, power-hungry individual who questions himself like, can I actually live up to the ranks? Can I live up to the ranks of being the head of the table? Next in line after Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is grooming me. Can I actually do that? I've gone to the mountaintop once before, I've beaten Gunther, I've become World Heavyweight Champion, but I was always doubted. And luckily with that, they always built it into the storyline, so it worked. And then where does it leave Jimmy Uso? I think it leaves Jimmy Uso in the best position he can be in, because let's be honest, since the Usos kind of broke up and went their own separate ways, Jimmy's done absolutely nothing on SmackDown. Like, he's been over, and I've always wanted him to get a singles, mid-card title at the US Championship. If you guys aren't going to do anything with Jimmy Uso, and we know Jey Uso does his best work with his brother in the bloodline, then let's get it going again. But this time, we're getting a twist where Roman Reigns is coming back and he's grooming Jey Uso in front of his brother Jimmy, which is a callback to I think 2021, where Jimmy Uso returned from injury and Jey Uso was the prime time right-hand man at the time, and they had that conflict. But right now, there's so much more history and layers behind their story over the last 5 years. And in this, where does The Rock come into play? And I know it's always controversial bringing up The Rock because he's so focused on making actual substance movies now in Hollywood. However, he's always going to be looming over here in terms of the bloodline story, like potentially being the true head of the table. When Roman Reigns is grooming Jey Uso, is it because he's leaving to go Hollywood, as in part of kayfabe, or do other projects? Or is it because he has to tackle a bigger problem in The Rock? The Rock being the only true competition for Roman Reigns' position at the head of the table. So again, this gets everyone speculating a lot more, and it gives Jimmy Jey storylines, segments that all matter. So I am in for this. I am curious to see what they do, because I genuinely think this is the most compelling version of Jey Uso since the right-hand man in the bloodline, and I think this could even give that a run for its money and outdo that version I mentioned. And on a side note, as a fan, I have criticized the WWE quite often recently to being stuck in a loop. One thing they do really well, and I think this is ever since Triple H took over, is they do bring in and merge in multiple stories all at once. Like, they have this sort of Avengers thing going on, which I really like. Of course, the biggest example of that is the Bloodline, and everyone linked or affected by the Bloodline. And in this case, it links into the Vision, and specifically Paul Heyman. And this leads me into the second topic of Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins at Crown Jewel, and how this links to what I mentioned earlier. Now, Paul Heyman, he's been used like a side piece chick for the last couple of months, majority of this year to be honest. And if you look at his entire track record, it's playing into the story as well. He's really jumped from superstar to superstar. What's more hot, he jumps on it. Of course, he's a smart businessman in terms of kayfabe. And with him having a track record where he jumps from person to person, of course, you had him announce Brock Lesnar at WrestlePalooza. That was brought up during the promo between Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. Who really is pulling the shots here? Who's in control of the Vision? Do we play Paul Heyman back into the Bloodline storyline? Do we have segments backstage where we almost see Jey Uso confiding in Paul Heyman and potentially using Paul Heyman to understand the dynamics of power and how exactly he got Roman Reigns to where he was around 2020? Thus leaning Jey Uso more towards the heel side of things, causing more chaos between him and Jimmy Uso. And then where does that leave Roman Reigns? Because we know Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman do not see eye to eye at all. And then that creates another layer, another issue now between Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. So I'll come full circle here, literally, and I say the Bloodline storyline and Roman Reigns returning in this capacity is only good for business. The WWE's been heavily critiqued recently, right? I mean, heck, even ESPN, their most recent partner, has given them a C, and they pretty much downranked the first PLE on their platform from WWE. And if we go back to last year, what was the hottest thing in the WWE? It was the Bloodline storyline heading into WrestleMania 40. And guess what? It tugged on multiple superstars. Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, The Rock, Dark. And I think this touches in further here by default, with Paul Heyman being involved in the Vision, and the Vision's head, Seth Rollins, going one-on-one with Cody Rhodes at Crown Jewel for the Crown Jewel Championship, the ring, or that massive, oversized, awkward championship. And what Paul Heyman's role in this feud and his role in the Vision, because to be honest with you, it's been evident on television, Paul Heyman does not look as secure with Seth Rollins as he did with Roman Reigns or as he did with Brock Lesnar. And they're feeding that into the storyline. So really there seems to be a power struggle, like who is calling the shots here? And because Paul Heyman is in that position, do we get an extension into what's going on with the Usos and Roman Reigns? And I just want to say, I love when they do this. I love when they merge universes together and they don't act like everything's just separate just because it's on a different part of the show or they're on different shows entirely. I love the synergy in the WWE and it makes wrestling way better. Now going further into Seth Rollins versus Cody Rhodes at Crown Jewel for the Crown Jewel Championship, I want to start off by saying I actually enjoy this concept. I might be the only one, and the only reason why I'm saying that is around this time of the year is we're very accustomed to having matches that aren't necessarily story driven, story fueled. I'm talking Survivor Series, you know, SmackDown versus Raw. Around October, November, all wrestlers start to get a bit uneasy and they start repping their colors and they start remembering where they're from, and it's a bit weird, but I've always enjoyed that. My most fondest memory is 2005, I think it was, SmackDown vs. Raw. You had Kane and Big Show on Raw, taking out Batista, who's part of SmackDown. I really enjoyed that dynamic. So I think there's a time and place in the WWE where you can have two champions from two different shows go one-on-one to see who the better man is, who the better champion is. And now that we've got War Games replacing SmackDown vs. Raw, I'm okay with Crown Jewel taking this sort of exhibition spot, if you will. But the good thing about this year is, unlike last year, we actually have a story by default in between Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes. Of course, we're going back to WrestleMania 38, where I don't even want to say it was the return of Cody Rhodes. I want to say it was the re-debut of Cody Rhodes, and he went one-on-one with Seth Rollins. And of course, since then it's been 0-3 for Rollins. That story's been telling itself, and it came to a hot pinnacle at WrestleMania 40, where they finally joined forces and Seth Rollins was the shield for Cody Rhodes. And ever since then, they've never really had a feud. Although they've been bitter rivals for a majority of their time together in the WWE, their most recent stint, they came together. And I think that tells the best story we could have this early on from WrestleMania 40. The reason why I mention that, at this stage in their careers, there is no way we would be getting Seth Rollins versus Cody Rhodes in any other circumstance if it wasn't for the Crown Jewel stipulation of champion versus champion. They've had practically no interaction of substance since WrestleMania 40, and we know they've been on good terms, they've been on the same page ever since. So as soon as they came face to face, it was like, oh, okay, hold on a minute. This isn't just going back to like 2022, 2023, the feuds. This is interesting because it's not your traditional babyface versus your heel. Well, on paper it is, of course, but the relationship and the dynamic between the two is a lot more complicated. And I think the WWE in wrestling is the hottest when it does these things where, number one, I mentioned earlier, it merges universes in together and it links characters together as well. And number two is when they don't go with the prototype typical babyface versus dastardly heel just for the sake of good versus bad, but there's more than what meets the eye between the two individuals. So I don't know if it's because WrestlePalooza was absolutely dog shit and the WWE decided, hey, look, listen, we need to pull our finger out. We need to start ramping up storylines. In Survivor Series isn't that far. Of course, we've got Crown Jewel coming up as well. Typically around this period in the year, we always have a bit of a lull in terms of compelling storylines, title changes. So I can sit here and say I'm quite happy how they've turned things around as of the last couple of weeks. Because ever since WrestlePalooza, there was always questions like, okay, we cannot wait till WrestleMania season next year to really change things up in the WWE. It's not just fans, it's also their own partner criticizing them and critiquing them, not in the best way possible. So we need to start ramping things up. So I'm all for it. Overall, I'll say this Raw was decent. Yes, there was a lot of repetition on Raw again, but we got promos of substance. We got a return, this time of Roman Reigns, which I dare I say had substance, the interaction between him and Jey Uso. So I'm curious to see how this unfolds. Anyways, that's all from me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.